A new poll shows that 47% of Americans believe the country is headed in the right direction. That is a notable, and in terms of recent history, pretty historically positive number. Joining me now, CNN senior data reporter Harry Enten. So put these numbers in perspective. 47% say we're headed in the right track. Where does that fit?
Yeah, you would think that that would be low, but take a look compared to where we were during the Trump administration when the same exact question was asked by Marist College, right? 47% say now we're going in the right direction. During the Trump administration, at this exact same point, it was just 31%. Now, you know me, John. I'm a fan of averages. I don't just like looking at one poll. But the general trend here is the exact same. So here's the question. Is the country going in the right direction or the wrong track? Right now, in the average polls, 43% say the right direction. A year ago, during the protests, during COVID, all that, it was just 22%. June of 2017, 34%. You have to go all the way back to the beginning of the Obama administration when 43% of Americans said that we were on the right direction. So this is the highest number in a decade, over a decade, in fact.
It's interesting to me because in June of 2017, the economy was ostensibly doing well, adding jobs, et cetera, still only 34%. Now we're at 43%. That is a big gap there. Is there a notable partisan divide here?
Yeah, there is. So, look, this is the country going on the right track, right direction, wrong track? These are the right direction numbers, right? And what do we see now? Look at this. 73% of Democrats say yes, we're going in the right direction. 38% of independents, just 11% of Republicans. Not a huge surprise. But compare that to where we were last year, right? Look at this. I think the big number here that we take away is the independents jumped from 16% in June of 2020 to now 38%, and Democrats at 73%, much higher than Republicans were at 39% in June.
That 39% were Republicans who said things were going well.
Yes.
So, it's dwarfed by the number of Democrats who now say things are going well. What is the number that a presidential candidate needs to hit in terms of right track, in theory, to get reelected?
Right. So I think this is rather important because essentially we're trying to say how good is, say, this low 40s number for Joe Biden right now in terms of the right track in presidential reelection. So what we see is when the incumbent party has won since 1980, the right track number, the right direction track number was 42%. Very, very close on average to where Biden is right now.
He's a little higher.
He's, in fact, a little bit higher, 43%. When the incumbent party loses, you normally have a right track direction only around 25%. Joe Biden is well above that. This is much closer to where Donald Trump was last year around. He was in the low 30s. So, look, right now, if you were just looking at this right track, wrong track number, you would say that 43% that Joe Biden has, very, very close to what normally incumbent parties need in order to win re-election.
There's some other numbers in this Marist poll also which show that people have a historically positive view of things, even though those numbers look somewhat negative. Did I set that up the right way?
Yeah, I think you did. Essentially, look, normally the number on right direction, wrong track is bad, right? The same with Congress's job approval rating, right? You hate Congress overall, you like your own congressman. But here, take a look here. Look at this. The approval of Congress right now, 31%. Man, that's really crummy compared to a disapproval of 60%. But it's significantly higher than pretty much any point during the Trump administration. In fact, you got to, again, go all the way back to June of 2009 in order to see a congressional approval rating in the 30s. So right now what we're seeing is, yes, these historically poor metrics are still poor, but they're not as poor as they were before, which is generally an indication that people are much more optimistic about the way the country is going, certainly compared to this point last year.
This goes in the everything is relative category.
That's exactly right. Look, it's bad, but hey, it's not as bad as it was before.
Harry Enten, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Oh, having a chuckle, Harry. I love how you put it. All right, let's talk about all of these numbers with CNN senior political analyst Kirsten Powers and Ryan Lizza. Okay, Kirsten, what do you think about these poll numbers, this optimism, at least trending in that direction?
Well, I mean, I think it's, if you're Joe Biden, I think you would be very happy. These are, things seem to have turned a corner, hopefully, in terms of COVID, although he's not hitting the target in terms of what he wanted in terms of people being vaccinated, but that's a little bit out of his hands, right? Because there are certain people who just aren't going to get it because it's available, and there are people being told not to take it by people on the right for the most part. So I think that if you're Joe Biden, I think this makes you very happy, and people are starting to feel a little more optimistic with the economy and with the way things are going, and things sort of feel like they're getting back to normal for a lot of people. And so yeah, I think it's really good news for Joe Biden.
I mean, if the numbers were not going up, it would be a little surprising, right? I mean, not that long ago, thousands of people were dying a day of a deadly disease. We're all locked at home, and the unemployment rate was at 10%. So I'm a little surprised that it's not higher, and the Republican number is kind of amazing.
That partisan
partisanship,
divide, wow.
Right? The economy is improving, the pandemic is improving, but because of polarization, there's a Democratic president in the White House, the parties flip and people say the country's going in the wrong direction just because of the party that controls the White House, despite the obvious evidence that like the pandemic and the economy are clearly improved from where they were before Biden was president.
But don't you think, though, I mean, can you get higher in this climate? That's the problem with polarization. I don't know that you can get higher than that.
Well, so to that point, because even if objectively you look at someone's circumstances and they've gotten better, but they're believing that things are going in the wrong direction, let's listen to what the Republican governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, says, because he's essentially addressing this when, he talks about how this has become a sort of a religion or a sport. Let's listen.
Politics is becoming religion in our country, that politics is becoming sport and entertainment in our country, that everything is political. It's a huge mistake, and it's caused us to make bad decisions during this pandemic and in other phases of our life as well. So it's deeply troubling.
It is deeply troubling.
Yes, it is. And I think that it's one thing when you treat politics that way when it doesn't involve life and death. It's another thing when it does, and I think that that's what we've seen. We've seen this trend moving, obviously, in this direction of polarization for quite some time. But what happened with COVID is we saw that people are actually willing to put other people in danger and put themselves in danger to actually die in furtherance of their political beliefs, that they're just willing to put their heads in the sand and say, well, the people I align with say that I shouldn't take this, so I won't take it, and I'm just going to ignore all the people that I would have in the past listened to, right? So I think that is the measure of how out of control things have gotten.
Yeah, I mean, once something like masks becomes a political issue, where if you're a Republican, you're less likely to believe in wearing masks, and if you're a Democrat, you're more likely. When the science became politicized during the pandemic, that's a moment where you're like, wow, everything is now political warfare and cultural. And he's not the first person to point this out. I think others have pointed out that as Americans have become less religious, that there have been other parts of our lives that fill that vacuum, and politics for a lot of people is surely one. If you spend a lot of time online, you realize every part of the culture now is politicized in some way.
Yeah, but I would also say even for people who identify as religious, take white evangelicals, for example, have seemed to have transposed religion and politics. So there's very little connected to, if you were to look at what their stated beliefs are in terms of faith, in the way that they behave, and instead they're behaving more like what Tucker Carlson says is what they should follow versus what Jesus says.
And religious leaders have facilitated some of that. We've certainly seen that.